Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes as folks trickle in. So hold tight, just a couple more minutes, and then we'll go ahead and get the ball rolling. Give it about 30 more seconds. Want to respect everybody's time, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get this going. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to CU Collaborate's Low Income Designation Area Workbook Updates webinar. My name is Michael, but before I get started with intros and review the agenda, just a couple of housekeeping notes. If you have questions or comments during the presentation, please put those in the chat. We do have time at the end for Q&A at the end of the session, but we'll try to get to those questions throughout. So feel free to pop anything that comes into your head into the chat. We'd be happy to answer those. Everyone is muted, so those thoughts and otherwise do need to go in the chat, but this webinar is being recorded, so I will send out the slide deck and that recording tomorrow to everyone who is registered. Okay, before I introduce our awesome hosts, I just want to give a quick overview of who we are. So CUCollaborate has a robust suite of products and services, including data analytics and consulting that touch field of membership expansion, low income designation, CDFI certification, attainment and retainment, mergers, branch strategy, and a whole lot more. So our data analytics also focus on performance measurement, regulatory optimization, market analysis, and a lot more. We're also experts in digital acquisition and can simplify that process for consumers and organizations to find, join, and borrow from credit unions. Our advanced software facilitates acquiring those new relationships and also can assist with regulatory optimization. I'm going to put a meeting link into the chat here if you have further questions on anything that is covered today. There we go. But this next slide goes into, excuse me, this next slide goes in a little more depth into some of the services and our main areas of expertise that I've mentioned, from growth strategy to digital acquisition. So again, I'll be sending out these slides. You can get a better idea of the scope of what CU Collaborate can do for your credit union. I also, of course, recommend that you visit us at cucollaborate.com for even more info. And now allow me to introduce you to our hosts. First up, Jason Russin, our advisory director. Jason has over 14 years experience in consulting with a focus on financial and performance management, data analytics, business process improvement, and organizational change management. Before joining CUCollaborate, Jason helped clients develop tools and strengthen management practices to improve operations at Booz Allen Hamilton and Grant Thornton. And next, our senior data analyst, Mariah Taylor. Mariah is a 2019 graduate of Duke University with a degree in statistical science and a passion for all things data. Since joining CUCollaborate, she has developed analytical strategies and visualization methodologies to provide clients with solutions in the areas of LID, CDFI, branching, and member demographics. Moving on, in a minute here, I'm going to be sharing a poll in the chat, so please take a second or two to complete that. We'll then provide an overview of LID, and then we'll get into the workbook and into the updates. Now, if you look at the chat, you'll see a poll that I'm about to launch here. There we go. It's we're trying to figure out where you're at in your LID journey. So Are you seeking to obtain LID for the first time? Are you under a cure notice and working to reobtain LID? Do you currently have LID and you're monitoring your status, or you're curious to learn more about that? So please take a couple of seconds to fill that out, and then I will go ahead and hand it off to Jason. Jason, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Michael. Great intro. Moving on to the next slide, I'm going to give a brief overview of the low-income designation, its benefits, and generally how it works before we launch and do the deeper dive into the workbook itself. So if we could go to the next slide, or it looks like I think I can change it myself. High-level overview, just what CUCollaborate does in this space and how we help credit unions attain and retain their low-income designation. So we've on the software side of the house, we've got a few different offerings, all aimed at helping you monitor and improve your low-income designation percentage. The first is the Analyze CU LID report that will let you examine your member data to see what your current percentage of low-income members is, to help you, understand if your LID status is at risk, or if you don't have LID yet, how you're trending towards your goal of obtaining it. We also have our mapping tool, Expand CU, which will let you visualize low-income designated areas on a map. It will also let you display information about your credit union, such as your branches and your membership itself, so you can see the relationship between your membership, your facilities, and these NCUA low-income geographies. Last but not least, we have an API that lets you test a single address or batches of addresses to see if they fall in low-income designated areas. On the strategy side of the house, we offer consulting services to help credit unions improve their LID percentage. So this will start with data cleaning and enrichment, but then we also offer support with marketing to low-income members, ways to target individuals living in these geographies. And then we offer a number of partnerships that actually help you acquire low-income members. So a lot of offerings, a lot of support we can provide to help credit unions attain and retain LID. In terms of how the low-income designation works, at a high level, it's quite simple to achieve LID. You just need to demonstrate to the NCUA that a majority of your members or your potential members qualify as low income. Who does the NCUA count as low income? We've got two boxes on this slide. On the left, the green box, these are the folks that will count. So any resident of a area that qualifies as low income, so that'll be the subject of the bulk of the presentation, is the NCUA has a workbook that lists all these areas. Other populations that count, high school age members also qualify as low income. What the NCUA does there is they will count all the members between the ages of 14 and 19, and they will apply attendance rates, so school enrollment rates from the census, to determine the number of LID qualifying high school students in your membership. For college, university, or vocational school students, if you're able to positively identify those individuals, the NCUA will accept every single one of them as a low-income member. And then for active duty military members, they will accept a slim majority. This is based on an economic analysis the NCUA did a number of years back, where they found just over 53% of active duty military members qualify. So that's who counts. In terms of who does not count, residents of non-low income areas. So there are some areas of the country where the overall income levels are too high to qualify. Then there are two other categories that are automatically disqualified. The first are any members that have a PO box as an address. The reason for this is you cannot accurately determine the physical location of an individual if they have a PO box. Their post office box might be located in the post office downtown, but they might live in another state, for example. Businesses do not count, but the way the NCUA identifies businesses is not based on the type of account. So they're not looking at natural person or organization accounts. Instead, what they do is they take a look at the address and they check the U.S. Postal Service's database. If the address is coded as a business in the USPS database, then they will count the individual as a business, or vice versa. There's, generally speaking, this is an accurate method, though we do find some exceptions, such as, businesses that are sole proprietorships that may be headquartered in someone's actual residence, or the opposite, where you might have residents of mixed use buildings, such as senior living facilities, where the main address will be coded as a business, but the individual might live in an individual unit. So generally speaking, it aligns, but we do find some exceptions here. I mentioned a credit union can qualify based on its potential membership. So this really applies to federal community credit unions, but if you can show the NCUA that a majority of your field of membership, so not your actual members, but a majority of the population in the community that you serve, is in low-income areas, then they will qualify you for LID based on that field of membership. It's a less frequent path to obtaining the designation, but we do have several clients that have been able to achieve LID through modifying their field of membership in such a way that they're able to, get a community where the majority are low-income qualifying. See some good questions rolling in the chat. We'll save those for the end, but we will get to them. It's great to see this level of engagement, so please keep them coming. In terms of why would a credit union want the low-income designation, what are the benefits? So there are a number of different regulatory relief options available to low-income designated credit unions. So first, for federal credit unions, the ability to accept non-member deposits from any source up to the greater of $3 million or 50% of total shares. So without the low-income designation, a federal credit union is restricted in terms of sourcing non-member deposits from governments or from other credit unions. So the designation opens up other institutions. So you could accept non-member deposits from, say, banks or other investors. Then the next benefit here is the ability to apply for loans or grants from the NCUA's Community Development Revolving Loan Fund. The grants are primarily aimed at smaller credit unions below 450 million in total assets, but there are a number of worthwhile grants that the NCUA does offer every year, and we do assist credit unions in applying for those grants. Those are offered usually every May. The next benefit is exemption from compliance with the aggregate member business loan limit. And I would say, from our experience working with clients, this is probably the most frequent reason a credit union is seeking to obtain the LID or to retain it. And if you have a healthy and growing commercial lending practice and would like to continue to see it grow, the low-income designation is key to enabling that continued growth. Next benefit here is related to subordinated debt. So any credit union can apply to take on subordinated debt, but if you have the low-income designation and you get subordinated debt, you can then count that subordinated debt. It's also known as secondary capital. You can count that subordinated debt as capital in your net worth ratio calculation. So this is another big benefit, helps credit unions that primarily serve low-income individuals who tend to be net borrowers, not net savers. This just helps offset some of the challenges with securing capital for those credit unions by allowing them to take sub debt and count it as capital for net worth. Last benefit here is limited to federal community credit unions, but there is added flexibility in terms of opening your field of membership up to individuals that participate in associations that are headquartered in your community. So it's not that you're adding the associations to your field of membership the way a seg-based or multiple common bond credit union, but rather people who don't live, don't work, don't attend school, or worship in your community, if they participate in an association that's located in that community, say by volunteering or donating, then that would open up another pathway to membership. So those are the main benefits of LID. And now I will pass it on to Mariah to talk about the NCUA LID Workbook.
Hi, everyone. So we're going to get started with the details of the NCUA LID Workbook. So first thing I'd like to go through is an overview of what census geographies are, how they work, and the general hierarchy of those. So on the next slide here, this shows what the census geography hierarchy is. So at the largest level, you have data at the state level, and then you go down to county, census tract, census block group, and then a census block, which is even smaller than a census block group. The geographies here listed with an asterisk are geography levels at which low income designation is evaluated. As you can see to the left, there is a little box for zip codes. We'll get into that in a little bit. But the zip codes do not fit into the census geography hierarchy because they are determined by postal routes by the USPS service, and the census geographies are drawn by the census. So the way that the methodology that's used to assess whether someone lives in a low-income designation area is called geocoding. On the next slide here. So geocoding is the process of providing geographical information to a location. So you take a street address, you get a latitude and longitude, and then you get a FIPS code. So what is a FIPS code? A FIPS code is a unique code for identifying different geographies. The table shown here goes over how those are kind of built. So a state has a 2-digit code. Counties have 5 digits, census tracts are 11 digits, and block groups are 12. And then again, zip codes are a separate type of thing, and they are 5 digits long. But again, like I had stated before, they don't fit into the overall census geography hierarchy. They are just kind of their own thing. And then a little bit, and then I'm going to transition here to the LID workbook structure. So when you go to the NCUA's website, so when we send these the slide deck out, there'll be a link here to find the LID workbook. It is in the form of an Excel spreadsheet, which includes tabs for those 3 geography levels that I mentioned, so county, census tract, and census block group. One thing to note here is that in previous years, there were tabs which included information on zip code qualifications, but the most up-to-date version of the LID workbook does not have that. This is due to the NCUA's, the purpose of the NCUA LID area workbook is to assist credit unions in identifying low-income populations and to increase their outreach efforts to those communities. It's not necessarily designed to, it is not designed to evaluate qualification. For that, the NCUA has their own internal tool, and we have confirmed that zip codes are still, or members are still being evaluated at the zip code level. It's just that they've chosen not to include it in their public-facing workbook. In this workbook, there will just be a list of those FIPS codes that I had mentioned, and any geography that is listed is LID qualifying. So which means that any member living in those areas counts towards low-income designation. I'm going to pass it back to Jason briefly to go over the data behind low-income designation, which I think will answer a couple of questions I've seen pop up in the chat. So go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, Mariah. So how did the NCUA get that list of counties, census tracts, and block groups? It's based on a survey that the U.S. Census Bureau runs called the American Community Survey. This is an ongoing survey that the census updates on a yearly basis. They survey individuals across the United States, across a very wide range of different topics, from income to household size to the language spoken at home, age, sex, race and ethnicity, employment, educational attainment, internet access. The list goes on and on. It's one of the most comprehensive sources of demographic data available to the public. A lot of marketing companies rely on it for, targeting information. A host of federal programs, federal funding initiatives base their allocations to different regions on data that comes out of the American Community Survey. And, as we all know here, the NCUA uses that data to figure out which geographies have incomes that qualify as low income. So the LID workbook is based on the 5-year estimates from the American Community Survey. And these are the highest fidelity results, really. The 5-year ACS results are available at every geography level. If you remember Mariah's, that inverted triangle chart, you can get down to that census block level. 1-year estimates, those are only available for areas with populations above 65,000. So for the LID analyses, we are using the 5-year estimates. It's based on the largest sample size, and since it is the highest fidelity data, it is by far the most reliable form of demographic estimates. In terms of the timing for the release of the ACS, the 5-year ACS comes out every December for the prior year. So in December of 2023, the Census Bureau released the 2022 5-year ACS estimates, which were collected over a 5-year period that ran from 2018 through 2022. The current NCUA LID workbook that they published at the end of June is based on those 2022 5-year ACS estimates. The ACS is updated every year, and so that means that the LID workbook, or at the very least the NCUA's internal LID tool, is updated every year based on the latest estimates from the 5-year ACS. The ACS includes a ton of different information, but the main data points that are used for determining which areas qualify as low income are median family income and median earnings, which are for individuals. The benchmark incomes are based on whether the area is in a metropolitan area or in a rural area, or as the census refers to as non-metropolitan area. So if you are in a metropolitan area, the benchmark income is going to be 80% of the metropolitan area median family or median earnings, or the national metropolitan median family income or median earnings. So whichever of those statistics is greater is going to define the benchmark, and then 80% of it will be that line that says anyone who's in any geography in a metro area with incomes 80% or below that benchmark are going to qualify as low income. If we're outside of a metropolitan area, the calculation is slightly different. What the NCUA does there is they take 80% of the statewide or the national non-metropolitan median family income or median earnings, whichever is greater, and they use that as the benchmark for what sets that 80% bar. If it sounds complicated, it is, because there are a number of different checks that you have to do using multiple data points to determine if a location is LID qualifying or not. But using multiple income points helps mitigate against low sample size, low survey response rates in some pockets of the country. So you might have not enough information to have a median family income stat, but you will have enough for a median earnings statistic and vice versa. So using both data points allows the NCUA to mitigate small sample sizes in certain cases. So bottom line, any county census tract or census block group whose median family income or median earnings falls below those thresholds will qualify as low income. And I think now I'm going to pass it back to Mariah, who will cover a deep dive into the changes between the published workbook versions.
All right, so we'll be discussing today the changes between the 2020 and the 2022 workbooks. The reason why we aren't comparing 21 and 22 is because there was not a public-facing workbook published by the NCUA based on 2021 data. So We are comparing a 2-year gap here. So a summary of those changes. Overall, the percentage of the population which resides in LID qualifying locations has increased from 50.09% in 2020 to 57.56% in 2022, which is a pretty large difference. The table shown here represents what proportion of the population qualifies at each geography level. This is important, as we had mentioned. We had mentioned that community charter credit unions can assess their potential membership, and when that is conducted, it is only at one geography level, whereas when any other type of credit union is assessing their actual membership, it is the qualification is determined at every single level. So here you can see, more than likely, if you are a community charter credit union, it may be most beneficial to be assessed at either the census tract or block group level, because over 40% of the total population qualifies at those levels, whereas at the county level, it is a bit over 20% of the population which qualifies at that level. So yeah. So we're going to go over state level changes and then county level changes. So at the state level, good news, only 2 states saw decreases in their LID population percentage, from which would be District of Columbia, so DC, and Delaware, and both of them only saw decreases by 0.12 percentage points, so not a huge difference. There were 7 states which saw their LID populations increase by over 5 percentage points, listed here. So Maryland, Wyoming, Alabama, Kentucky, Vermont, Mississippi, and Montana. And to show you what that kind of looks like on a few maps, we have those first 4 states here. So you can see shifts in the population in certain areas. For example, in Maryland, you have one county that went from partially LID qualifying to completely LID qualifying. In Wyoming, you see in the northwest portion of the state, there seems to have been an increase in LID population geographies. And then Kentucky looks fairly similar, but as you can see towards the towards kind of the center, there's a bit filling in. And then Alabama here sees some filling in also towards the center as well, and in the south. So, and then here are the 3 other states I mentioned. So we have a few. Again, Vermont looks pretty similar, but the percentage of population change is still significant, even though it's not necessarily visible or as visible on the map. In the southern end of Vermont, you see some filling in there. And then Mississippi, you see some filling in both in the north and the south. And Montana here towards the center / south end, you see some increases in LID geographies. And then next, we're going to discuss some county level changes. So I'm going to start with negative changes, which were a few, but this table summarizes or shows that there were 7 counties that went from some LID qualified to 0% LID qualified. All of them are pretty small counties, so overall not a huge change in necessarily the number of people that are now not LID qualifying, but it is kind of interesting to see that before, for example, in Lincoln County, Colorado, you had in 2020 62% of the population which qualified, and now 0%. But on the bright side, so on the next slide, I highlight a couple of counties that saw significant decreases in both percentage and number of LID qualified individuals. So that would be Dutchess County and Sussex County. Michael, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So Dutchess County decreased in New York decreased by 9.93 percentage points, which resulted in about 28,000 less people qualifying for LID. And then Sussex County in Delaware decreased by almost 9 percentage points as well, with a decrease of 16,000 people. But if we go to the next slide, we can discuss some of the positive changes, which were much stronger. So there were a total of 18 counties that went from less than 50% of their population being LID qualified to being 100% LID qualified, which is good news. Here in these maps, I'll highlight a couple of counties which saw significant increases in both their percentage and number of LID qualified individuals. So earlier on that map of Maryland, you saw one county, which happened to be Prince George's County, which went from 64.57% LID qualification to 100%, which is an population increase of almost 370,000. And then Hayes County in Texas saw an increase from 52.46% to 100%, which represents an increase in LID population of 128,000. And yeah, I believe that wraps everything up, and I'm sure we have plenty of questions to answer in the chat, so I'll let Michael moderate that.
We do have quite a few questions. First one's from Brian. Once a CU receives a low-income designation from the NCUA, this designation never expires, right? Is there a need to recertify after initial LID?
That's a great question. So there's not a need to recertify in terms of, you don't have to submit anything to the NCUA on a regular basis to retain that designation. However, as part of your annual exam, the NCUA will take a look at your area share file. They will look at the member addresses in that area share file. And if they find that you've fallen below 50% members living in low-income areas, they may send you a cure notice. If the NCUA sends you a cure notice, it will give you 5 years with which to return to over 50% LID members to retain the designation. So during that 5-year cure period, you still have your low-income designation. You still enjoy the regulatory relief afforded to low-income designated credit unions. However, if you still have not obtained, gotten back above 50% low-income members by the end of that 5-year period, they will take away the LID. A credit union that receives a cure notice can submit a request to the NCUA Credit Union Resources and Expansion Office, the cure office, to ask for an assessment of their member data that includes some of the other populations that I mentioned on that earlier slide who qualify for LID, such as members of high school student age, college students, university students, and military members. So those data points don't exist in the ARIES file. However, the NCUA will accept a request to analyze a member file that includes addresses, plus your member ages, and military and college enrollment status. So they will do that for a credit union up to 3 times within a 12-month period. So that, does offer credit unions an opportunity to determine their current LID percentage beyond what is revealed by just the standard address-based analysis.
Thank you,
Hopefully
Jason.
that answers the question, and please add follow-on questions if I didn't get it completely.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have a follow-up question, please feel free to either schedule time with us or pop it in the chat here. A good dovetail question from David. For data cleaning, is Melissa the source for addresses?
So we use Melissa data. They're a third-party vendor to determine if an address is a business address. Our understanding is that this is the same data provider that the NCUA uses for this address verification check. So yes, but just for business addresses.
And then we use a couple of other things to add to enrichment. So we use National Student Clearinghouse to verify college enrollment. And then as far as our geocoding service, we use another third party called Geocodio to geocode our addresses. We've found through extensive analyses that the way, so it's kind of funny, geocoding is an exact science, so it actually does differ depending on the service you're using. So when it comes to determining, for example, like what census tract a member falls into, we've found that the service that we use it is more in alignment with what we see from results from the NCUA. So,
From Nina, can you expand just a little further about the non-member deposit benefit of LID?
Sure. So with a low income designation, a credit union can accept non-member deposits from any source up to the greater of those thresholds that are on the slide. So $3 million or 50% of total shares, whichever is greater. If you do not have the LID and you are a federal credit union, you would be restricted in sourcing non-member deposits from governments or from other credit unions. So one way that we see credit unions using the low income designation is to help with bank purchases, because it allows you to bring the bank's deposits over onto your balance sheet without first having to convert all of those deposit holders to members. So it can help facilitate the acquisition of banks, but it also helps, opens up additional sources of non-member deposits for credit unions that just need extra sources of liquidity.
From Emmanuel, what constitutes as a low income area in terms of income brackets?
So this gets into the census information. It's based on median family income or median earnings. So if the geography is located inside of a metropolitan statistical area, then the benchmark is going to be 80% of that, the greater of that metro area's MFI or ME, or the national MFI or ME. And then if you're outside of a metro area, if you're in a non-metropolitan or rural area, they're going to use 80% of the statewide or the national non-metropolitan MFI or ME, whichever is greater.
Does a PO box count if you have a street address associated with the account?
What I would say here is that if you have a member with a PO box and they have a physical address, so if you have two addresses for one member and one is a PO box and one is a physical address, I would recommend only showing the NCUA the physical address. This is one challenge with the Aries file analysis process that I mentioned that they do as part of the annual exam is, they're going to take the Aries share file, which has a mailing address field. The mailing address field often has the PO box if you have two addresses. And so when you go to submit a ad hoc, so an ad hoc request to CURE, in the member data file that you present to CURE, for any members that have a PO box and a physical address, we would just say, be sure that you're including the physical address in that submission.
Awesome. Have we updated this information in the CUCollaborate LID dashboard?
Yes, we have recently adopted the new NCUA LID workbook in our dashboard and in our mapping tool. So if you're in Expand CU and turn on the low income designated area layer, the shaded green geographies that appeal will be from the latest NCUA LID workbook.
So a question from Jeff, county first, if then no good, or excuse me, if then good, if not, then down the triangle to census tract and census block. If not in there, then tag an income of member and match to that income median, and then see if that member address qualifies if the member didn't qualify through the workbook, correct?
Jason, you might be able to elaborate more, but I think you can. Jason, correct me, or I actually have a follow-up question of my own. So when you evaluate someone's membership, can you combine geography level analysis with actual incomes? Because a lot of times actual income data is not available at the share level, but it is at the loan level.
So that's a really good question. If we are looking at just the address, then we would only be limited to the geographies. So if an address falls, if we take a given address and the county is not LID qualifying, but the census tract is, then the member qualifies. Similarly, if the county is not LID qualifying, the census tract is not LID qualifying, but they're in a block group that is LID qualifying, the member counts as LID. And then the reverse is true for the county level. So that's based on address. The NCUA will not let you combine an address-based analysis with an income analysis. However, they've actually taken this guidance down off their website, but it's still in the reg. They do allude to the opportunity of submitting a random sample of income data pulled from loan application. It has to be a statistically valid sample that would provide a 95% confidence that you are actually predicting the overall income level of your membership. The example that they gave in their guidance was, pulling income data from all loans for a 5-year period. In that case, you would be able to use the income data paired with the address to determine if the individual members qualify as LID and be able to show, over 50% of your borrowers over that 5-year period were low income qualifying, then the NCUA says that you would be able to qualify for the designation. We have not seen any credit unions use that approach to date. So it would be interesting. It would be an interesting project to try to take on to test out that possibility. For most credit unions, what I would say, focusing on your member addresses, identifying, their ages, so we can model high school students, determining, which of your members are enrolled in college, university, or vocational school. That can be done through the enrollment verification process Mariah mentioned, through the National Student Clearinghouse, or it can be done through a member survey. Those would be, more feasible and tried and true methods for qualifying members as LID.
You mentioned, question from Isaac, you mentioned the LID threshold changed. Is that correct? Previously just over 50% and now 57%?
Yes. So that statistic is based on population. So it's not necessarily that 50% of geographies are LID. It's more that or were LID and now it's 57. It's 57% of the population lives in low income areas.
And from Johnny, does the oh, sorry.
I was going to say, like, the threshold for attaining LID is and always has been a majority of your members.
Yes, yes. The threshold that is you're actually evaluated at is 50% plus one member. So that's what that is. And then the actual number, the percentage of overall population in the United States that lives in low income areas is about 57%. So.
Question from Johnny, does the NCUA differentiate between commercial loans and member business loans when granting relief from the MBL threshold? Meaning, does this LID relief help greenlight both commercial and business loans?
That's a really good question. The member business lending cap applies specifically to member business loans. I know that commercial lending overall is a subject of an annual exam. But yeah, my understanding is the MBL cap is specific to the member business loans.
And a follow-up question on LID expiration recertification. If the NCUA reviews share areas and determines a CU no longer qualifies for LID, they'll issue that cure notice providing a 5-year countdown. But what if a CU has subordinated debt with last redemption date 13 years away, 2032 in their case, with the CU keeping LID through the last sub-debt redemption date? Will the CU keep LID through that last date?
Our understanding is that the NCUA would treat that on a case-by-case basis. So, you know, what I would say is you have a 5-year runway to try to return to over, a majority LID membership. And as you're getting closer to the end of that 5-year period, if you're still not back above 50%, I would reach out, to the NCUA to talk through, potential options for handling the existing sub-debt.
And from Stephanie, where on the examination documentation does it show if the credit union is low income designated?
That's a really good question. I think I might have confused some folks. So the assessment of LID is not a formal part of the exam. It is a process run in parallel at the same time the exam is conducted using the data the credit union provides the NCUA from their exam. So the pattern that we have seen is many credit unions receive their cure notices in April. And our suspicion, or at least what we've seen from the data is, at least from the reports that have been provided, is that they're using ARIES file data that was provided during the annual exam, but the actual LID assessment process is run separate from that. So you would receive a notice, and you would receive a letter from the NCUA notifying you if you have fallen below 50%. If you're not a low income designated credit union, you could receive a notice in the mail saying that they've run your numbers and found out that you are now over 50% LID membership. So we do have some clients that have found out through that manner. It's a little bit of a pleasant surprise that they qualify.
And Jason, how can CUCollaborate help a credit union find out what their official low income percentage is?
Well, we offer a suite of software tools, as I mentioned, specifically the Analyze CU Low Income Designation Dashboard. That will allow you to upload your ARIES share file, plus your members' birth dates, college enrollment status, military status, and you can visualize on a dashboard what the current percentage is. And you can, if you make regular uploads over time, there's also a feature on the dashboard that will show you the trend line.
Awesome.
And in
Well,
addition, we
go
can
ahead.
help with an official ad hoc submission, right, to the NCUA?
That's correct. Yes, we do also provide support through the submission process, helping you prepare that member data file, and then helping field any questions or points of clarification from the NCUA during that assessment process.
Very cool. Well, I think that's all the questions that I can see in the chat. Thank you very much for joining us today. You're welcome to schedule time with us from that meeting link that I put in the chat, or keep an eye out for the information I'll be sending to all of you tomorrow, which again will include the recording and the slides. We'd be happy to go over any products or services you're interested in, but we sincerely appreciate your time and attention. Oh, one last question popped in. Sorry. From Carolyn. Can you discuss how some credit unions have effectively marketed their services to these very specific qualified individuals since media? Oh, that's in the Q&A. Sorry, I got cut off here. Okay. Can you discuss how some credit unions have effectively marketed their services to these very specific qualified individuals since media channels often span a wider swath or do not allow for targeting based on income?
we would recommend, geo-targeting, advertising or mailers to residents of low-income geographies. So you can use the low-income designated workbook. Our API can take a list of addresses and help you figure out which of those addresses are in low-income qualifying areas, so that if you've gone out and purchased marketing lists, you can then do more precise targeting. I think focusing on the types of loans and services that lower income individuals find appealing is also helpful. So, fee-free, low minimum balance checking and savings accounts, low or no overdraft or NSF fees, affordable unsecured personal loans with, short terms or small dollar amounts, affordable auto loans. We would recommend any and all of those approaches. We also have some partnerships. I know in a previous webinar, we featured the National Auto Loan Network. They specialize in refinancing auto loans, and they use our LID API to identify, LID qualifying borrowers with auto loans that could be refinanced through a credit union for a more affordable interest rate. And, the arrangements can be set up in different ways, but generally speaking, they allow a credit union to, apply their own underwriting standards and decision-making process to that partnership, so they can, control, have a high degree of control of the types of loans that they're able to source. But, you're guaranteed that every single loan you source is going to be from a low-income qualifying individual. I also see another question here in this Q&A about the timing of census data updates. So the American Community Survey that the low-income geographies are based on, that is actually updated every single year, not every 4 years. It's a 5-year estimate, but it's updated every year. And so the NCUA's LID workbook, or at least their internal tools, they also are updated on a yearly basis.
And I know we touched. Oh, sorry, Jason.
It's okay. I'm just reading, like, this is a pretty good question here, because it's asking if it would affect the charter of an area that was once LID and is no longer designated. The NCUA does not really have guidance on this topic. What I would say is, if you were granted LID through the field of membership route, if the NCUA were to send you a letter saying that you no longer qualify for LID, reach out to us. We can analyze your current field of membership, see if it still does qualify, and if it does, help you navigate the process of requesting that the NCUA look at the FOM and not your area share file.
And I know we touched on this, but great to just reiterate, is LID designation based on current members or potential members? And if potential members, we wouldn't have an ARIES file for them. So how would we measure those potential member LID eligibility?
What we would do is, here, I'm trying to find the slide that had geography. So in that case, we would first want to understand the boundaries of that geographic area. So if it's a set of, let's say 3 counties, we would take a look at the population of those 3 counties, look at the NCUA LID workbook, see if any of those counties are LID, and then figure out the LID population at the county level. Then we would go and do the same analysis by breaking those 3 counties into census tracts, and then assessing the LID population at the census tract level. And then finally, we would then go down to the block group level. And, if any one of those levels gets you over 50% LID population, then we would be able to submit a request to the NCUA to assess, the list of either counties, tracts, or block groups, so that they could confirm, with their own data that they agree.
Awesome. Some great questions. And thank you, Jason and Mariah. I think that wraps us up. Again, keep an eye out for the recording and the slides tomorrow. But we sincerely appreciate your time and attention. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone.